welcome back to another episode of The Single Spark. Now, today's episode is as much of a surprise to me as it is to you, because I was knee-deep into podcast recording. If you're clever enough, you'll go back and you'll spot the same hair with similar outfits. So I've recorded it. Obviously, we've relaunched The Single Girl's Guide to Life as The Single Spark. So all of the outfits have a little bit of kind of sparkle in them in some way. So you'll notice today that there is if you're watching on the vid, you'll see that there's rainbows, shooting stars, clouds. There were stars on my top today. Not a prerequisite that you need to be watching online. But normally what I do is I plan them all out. I've actually got sort of 12 planned out. And I was just about to go and I was like, which one do I do next? Which one's going to sequence well? How does this work? And in between my breaks, because I could do one after the other, but I got a bit hungry and had breakfast. I jumped across, scrolling social media as you do in the middle, checking on all the things that were going on. And I stumbled across a response in our Facebook community. I'd said, what have you found? Sorry, I didn't say that. I said, what have you been finding a challenge with in your single/dating life recently? It goes out as a monthly question because it's a great one to acknowledge that it's not easy being single or dating. And there are a couple of comments at the time that I'm reading this at, and Kelly has written something. So Kelly's actually the inspiration for this episode. So thank you to Kelly. And this is what I love about the community, is that we share in there, we get heard, we get seen. And then for something as important as this, now I will reply to both people in due course, and hopefully other people will reply to them too. But I get to also make episodes on the things that matter to you. I've always used the community for that. You get responses, okay, and that's why I have to respond directly, because that's an instant response, whereas this is going to take a few weeks to come out. But I'm not single anymore, so it isn't always as easy to remember exactly what it's like. I definitely empathise with you. I can always think about my scenario. I've got tons of journals that remind me of exactly what it was like to be single. But this one's really interesting. Kelly says, her response to the question was, when you find someone that you genuinely care for and want to be with, but have hesitation simply because you're concerned about giving up freedom and individuality. So today's episode is looking at, are you really ready to give up your freedom and individuality as a single? It's the debate basically about kind of, are you ready to date again? And we're not ready in the sense of, have we got over our ex? Are we over that situation? Different kind of, are you ready? You're probably quite confident and you think you are ready. I don't know Kelly's scenario exactly, but I theorise or interpret that the chances are is that you've been dating. Whether you met, maybe you didn't make them for a date night, maybe they're just a friend and you found someone that you genuinely care for, want to be with, is what she says. You're hesitant because what does that mean for the life that you've been living now? And I remember this, and the reason I wanted to really rapidly address this is because I do remember this feeling, and I still have it now. But I want to go into a few things. I mean, one of the ways that you get through single life is by looking at the positives of single life, right? And I think it's bloody brilliant, okay? Because you get to enjoy life the way you want, with no obligations at all to anyone. Okay, yeah, you might have a job, etc. But assuming that you live alone, you have this level of freedom that you've not otherwise had since you became an adult. Now, don't get me wrong, obviously when you went to uni, you would have had that first sort of experience of freedom. But you were probably sharing a space with other people at uni, and even if they were your friends, you had to deal with them. I don't know what you've been doing since then, whether you've been in a relationship or not, but obviously I went straight into then sharing a space with it was my ex's family initially, and then it was him on his own. And actually the way our lives worked, and because I eventually came out of theatre into teaching, I was there in the evenings and he was at work in the evenings. We actually missed each other a lot. It was one of the contributing factors actually to why I think our relationship didn't sustain over time, and that's totally circumstantial. I had been in theatre when I started, but I had a lot of space to myself, which I think helped. And when you create this now on your own, so I have this space that is my own, it's designed the way I want it. No one has to tell me to change the colour of the wall, because I love yellow and it's going to be yellow and it's going to be colourful and it's going to be fun. And I do try to keep it tidy, but it's not always the tidiest. It's not unclean. It's just sometimes there's a lot of stuff out. So I'm recording this now and I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, well, all the blankets are over on the sofa bed. over there because I don't need them right now. But they're normally on here, and sometimes they're folded, and sometimes like they've been in use and they're on the sofa. But it doesn't bother anyone because it's my space, and there's very rarely people here. Different now, obviously. Jason comes to stay once a week or so. I go to his, and we have to look at how does that work when we share our spaces. And it's this element of like, what do we do? How do we do this here? And how do I know if I want to give those things up? Because I remember sitting and being like, I don't think I could ever share a space with anyone again. Because this is my space. Like, how do I feel about somebody coming in and like being in it, disrupting it in some way? And I'm not saying it would be a bad disruption, but like, you're here. Like, for those that don't already know, this is not the biggest space on earth. Like, I can see my kitchen and my office space and my TV living room plus spare bed, because it's also like a second bedroom, from here, and my bookshelf and the hamster. So it makes it sound like it's big, but I promise you could walk from left to right in 12 steps if you wanted to. And downstairs is the bedroom and the bathroom. There's not loads of space. Max people living here is 2. Maybe at a push you've had a kid. There was definitely a family that lived in one of these. 2 adults, 2 children. I don't know how they did it. But this is my space. And so the pros of being single, as well as like living on your own, is that you get to do what you want, design things when you want. When something comes up at the weekend, you're not thinking, oh, like, am I meant to be having dinner with someone? Like, are they expecting to have lunch together? Are they expecting to spend Saturday together? Or can we do our own things? Like, you can just do what you want, when you want, because you haven't got to think about that. And I'm not saying that being in a relationship is a chore to do that, because most people want to do that. I like having that. I want to do it. But when you embrace the freedom and the wonder that is single life, it totally becomes a thing, because you are like, what does this mean if someone's in my space, in my world, and I've got to start making compromise? I remember, what was it? I remember the first time, it was cancelling on Jason, as it were, when I felt like, I've got to tell him I don't want to see him because I want to go do something else. And I consciously remember at that time being like, this is the difference between being single and not. It was some sort of thing with my maybe mum and brother. It was an event that I'd just been invited to, maybe for the next day or the day after. And I really wanted to go to whatever it was, just because I hadn't seen them, or I really wanted to go to what they were doing. And I was like, I remember messaging and being like, hey. It was quite early on in our relationship, so I felt like it was even stronger to do it to some degree. Because I was like, hey, I'm still trying to maintain my individual autonomy here. And autonomy is one of my biggest values. So if anyone were made to make this episode, it is moi. I remembered messaging and being like, hey, this is the kind of first time I've done this. I know we've got a bit of a routine of like Thursday nights, but I'm pretty sure it was my mum. So I was like, my mum's just texted me. She's just invited me to go along to this. Do you mind if I'm not there on Thursday, or I come back home later because I've been out? I can't remember what exactly the proposal was. Or do you want to stay back at yours so you don't drive and have to go back or anything like that? And so obviously that happened. I went and did whatever it was, whether it was mum or someone else. And he was totally unfussed in a good way. Like, it was like, yeah, like, of course, like, things are going to come up sometimes. And we have this date in as a routine thing because we want to see one another. But ultimately, it's not going to be that every week. And we have to flex and we have to change and do that. And so you can only know if you're really ready by being in it and doing it. And seeing how that person responds and what their expectations are. Now, when we take this new scenario on, we have to say no to some other things. And I referenced this a couple of episodes back where I was talking about you want to not get yourself into the wrong relationship just because you want a family life, etc. Because by saying yes to the family life really quickly, you're saying no to having potentially a stable family life because you haven't done your due diligence in dating. And so if you really want the family life that you want, where you give yourself the chance of staying together as a family and being a couple as you raise a child, like, you've got to say no now to the people that are wrong to be able to say a stronger yes later on. But whatever we say yes to, we're saying no to something else. So when you end up saying yes to dating, and yes to a relationship, you end up saying no to automatic default, I am an individual all of the time. Now, that's not to say that you give up everything when you start dating or when you find yourself in a relationship. Because there is you, there's them, and there's the relationship. And that's an element that can help you understand that there's 3 parts to this. It's not that you become one. It's not that you are 2 individuals. There's 3 bits. There's them, there's you, and then there's the relationship. And ultimately, what that looks like is down to you. Now, you might be like, what are you talking about, Chantel? Like, if you're together, you should be spending an increased amount of time together over time. You should look to be moving in together, and you can put a timescale if you want on it, within a year and a half, 2 years, whatever it might be. And then you're going to get married, and like you're going to then spend every single day together, X, Y, Z. The reality is, it doesn't have to look like that. That's what it looks like a lot. It's what a lot of people would expect, but it isn't something that you have to. And so when it comes to this dilemma, finding someone that you genuinely care for and want to be with, but you have a hesitation on your freedom individuality, like which part is it? Is it the living together aspect? If it's that level, then there's every possibility that you can make your relationship one that likens to Tim Burton and Helena Bonham Carter's. They're not together anymore, and I don't think that's a negative, but they maintained their own individuality by having, I think it was a split house, but with an adjoining door. They lived separately. Jason and I do not live together. We've been together nearly 2 years, and I have my home and he has his. That's that. I have a mortgage on this property. I love it to pieces. I'm super attached to it. I'm not just going to sell it for someone I've been with for 2 years, as much as I like you, Jason. He totally understands that. This is my space. And he has children, not all of the time, but even so, if we did combine, then you've got to be prepared to be involved with the children for the time that they're there for. And that's, in my situation, that's a big ask for someone that doesn't have kids, you know? Like, that's strong. They're there 50% of the time. So if we were to move in, I'd be basically saying yes to, oh gosh, like being not a parent, obviously, because you're not their parent, but equivalent of a step parent for 50% of the time. And that's like, well, wait, I don't think I want that. Do I want that? Do I want that? Don't I want that? Like, I don't think I want that. So I'm going to maintain my space, because then I can go whenever I want. I can come and go between those. Now, other people would be like, well, if you're together, you should be living together. And that's the bit that you've got to be confident enough to tackle. Now, this only works if I continue this forever and was like, I'm always going to live on my own. I will come and stay with you. You can come and stay with me, but it's not for me to live with you for whatever reason. Maybe it is because there's kids. Maybe it's just because I want my own space and we're not going to get on decoration-wise. It could be anything. But that only works if that person has the same level of expectation or acceptance of that. And they might be like, you know what, yeah, I really like my space too. I can see that we would totally clash if we tried to like combine and live together, because you're going to want things colourful, I'm going to want things grey. And that sounds petty, but like things like that cause little arguments that grate on people over time. So you want to spend time, if you've got it, testing if you could or couldn't live together. You want to know if that's the thing. Now, this might be further back than like a living together situation. I use that because it's an example of where we've bucked the trend. There's no rush on that. It's not even anything that we're necessarily planning. This is my home. This is my mortgaged property. It's going to be mine. I love it. I don't know what. Like, you can see how much joy it brings me and the attachment I have to it. But if we take a step back to where I think you might be at, which is probably not like a combining household situation, it's more like a, do I start becoming an us? And again, it comes down to, well, is it the sheer amount of time that you would spend together? Is it that you would be expected to take them to things? Jason and I do not go to the same things. Would he be invited? So he wasn't necessarily invited to my friend's wedding. I didn't ask. I wasn't fussed. She invited me singularly. She's met Jason once or twice, and I wouldn't have expected an invite, and I didn't bother to ask either. And I didn't feel like it would be wrong to do so if so. But we decided that for things like that, I don't know if you've ever found this, but person is my friend. I didn't know that many people at the party, like, because it's not like there's no friendship circle that I belong to where I was there for that. I basically know her friends by default of going to many of her socials. But if I don't know that many people, then what is Jason going to do? And this person is my friend. Jason doesn't know her. It's not like we've spent loads of evenings together and they've got to know one another and she sees us as like a pair. Like, I see my friend on my own most of the time too. So we made the decision that for things like that sometimes, it wasn't really of that much importance of us to feel that we had to ask for a +1. If she'd invited us, that would have been fine, and I'd have said, yeah, sure, or not. We might have decided, actually, no, we don't want a +1, or it's going to be better not to. We don't, by default, assume either way, or we didn't at the start, assume either way, that we would go to one another's things, whether there was an invite or not. We took the family introductions very slowly. Jason wanted to do that very slowly. And there was a party that came up a few months into our relationship. He was like, I'm just not ready for that yet. I don't want to meet people just yet. Cool, that's fine. I'll go on my own. But I don't feel that it's a question of my relationship from anybody when someone goes, well, where are they? And I go, oh, well, they're just doing XYZ today. They're doing something instead. They were busy. It just wasn't something they were ready to do. And if that's something that you need to take slowly, then it's a case of communicating that and going, look, I feel a little bit nervous about saying yes to dating more because, like, I get a lot of freedom being on my own, and I totally get all of the pros and benefits that we get. You know, I love the time we spend together. I love XYZ. But I've spent a lot of time on my own. And I want to make sure that we're kind of on the same page and going at a similar pace so that you don't outpace me with what you're thinking and I don't slow you down or vice versa in any particular way. And that's just good communication in your relationship. So my best, if I had to give big sister advice, which you do not have to take, and legally, I don't know what disclaimer I need to put in there, but I'm just disclaimering, like, it's not the only way to do it, many ways to approach this. But I think having the conversation with the person, I'm really worried about what that means for, what that will mean for, like, me as an individual. And I can't put an exact on Kelly's response at this point. I don't know exactly what it is that's holding her back. Is it going to family events together? Is it that you won't be able to go away on holiday with friends because by default you'll feel like you have to go? Oh my God. I don't take Jason to concerts that don't suit him. And I've had to learn which ones do and don't suit. So, like, we went to Creamfields together because he likes dance music too. I still don't think that's his scene. I don't think I'm a festival goer through and through. I think he would rather sit on the hill and watch the music. And I'm like, let me get to the front, depending on who it is. Very different styles. He didn't come to see Panic at the Disco with me. I saw them in Glasgow by pure chance. That's where his friends are all from. So we actually flew up together and spent the weekend in Glasgow together. It was originally planned as a solo trip. He went to see his friends the night that I went to see the Panic at the Disco concert. Like, there's a level of individuality that you can still have. I'm planning a little weekend away with one of my friends. We haven't actually spoken about it for a little while, but in my head I just said, babe, me and my friend want to do this. Don't mind if it's that weekend, do you? And he's like, no worries at all. So, interesting. I checked. Well, I actually don't think I checked. I put it in the diary. It updated the calendar. I went, oh, did you see that? I'm planning to do that. Is that all right? You don't mind, do you? You didn't have any exact pull to go to Dublin at all, did you? Like, a little check-in that you're not leaving someone out. You're not doing something that your partner really wished they could do with you. Actually, having this consideration for them, but then also, in reverse, being okay when they say, I want to go and do X, Y, Z with this person. Because if you want that individuality and freedom, you've got to give it to someone else. So in terms of, like, are you really ready to give it up? I think the only way you can know is by starting and doing it. So you have the conversation, you say, like, I would really like us to start taking it to the next level, but I'm a tad hesitant. And it's nothing that you're doing, if it's not directly being caused by them being like, oh, and we'll live together and we'll do this. It's nothing that you're doing. It's more my hesitation at the fact that, you know, this is what it normally means when you date. And I'm just not sure, because I've not really got to this point recently and had to think about it. Like, I'm not sure what it means for me in terms of maintaining this individual sense of myself and getting to go and do X, Y, Z on my own. And what that means for us if we develop as a couple and how you see that working out on me. So, and then throw some scenarios out. So if I wanted to go away on holiday, like, what does that look like in terms of if I wanted to go over with my friends? And when it comes to like living together, I don't really know what I want yet. Like, so maybe at some point I want to live with you, but I'm not sure if I do or I don't. Like, I couldn't even say. Now, if they turn around and say, well, like, look, I'm not being funny. I want to go on holiday every year with you at least. And, you know, actually living with someone is quite high on my list. Like, I could do it for a year, but actually I want to, but within 2 years, I want to be living with someone. Then that gives you their expectation of what's going to happen. And you could go, okay, well, you know what? I do like a couple holiday every year. If I can afford it, maybe I'll go on an extra one with my friend. Now, that depends if you've got the resource. And you might say, I mean, you know what? I would love a couple holiday most years. But right now we're in like a new phase. I think I still want to have a friend holiday. So we might not do that for a couple of years. And then obviously in the house situation, if it's that, then you're going, I just don't think I'd want to ever. Now, you can take the risk and you can share that in the sense of share it and say, you know what? I just, at this point, I don't see that happening. And I want to be upfront about it. That said, if we want to keep trying this and seeing if I change my mind, then cool. But I want you to be aware that it's not something that's instantly on the cards for me, and I'm not promising anything. But if they then come back and go, well, it would be a deal breaker for me if someone didn't want to live with me within the first couple of years, then suddenly we're at this stage and it's so annoying. Matthew Hussey talks about, and I can't remember the stages because I haven't had to do this for such a long time, but he talks about this compatibility stage, which is the fourth stage. Like there's something like connection, and then there's attraction, it could be the other way around, and chemistry. There's a few C's in there. And then it becomes compatibility. And you only get to that threshold by having dated, by having got to know someone, to be intimate with someone. And it's when you really start to look at the practicalities of your life. What does that look like? And it can be the most devastating point that you learn you have to say no. Because you've got everything else, and Kelly's alluded to some level of this. You care for them and you want to be with them. But there may be some level of a compatibility issue in that what you expect and want from a relationship, which may be slightly more detached than some people would expect, or what the norm would be. And I use norm with inverted commas because norm is different to everyone, but you might want to do it differently, the same way that Jason and I have done it. And the reason that I share that is because so many people, that no one's ever commented on that to me. Who knows what gets said behind closed doors? I don't care what gets said about behind closed doors. But I'm in no rush anymore in my life because I feel like I rushed in my early 20s. So the idea of anything going quickly anymore, I mean, sometimes I feel it. I'm like, oh, why can't we just do this? But I don't care about it so much. I look at what I've got and I'm like, I really like this now. And some people will be like, but don't you want that? I mean, maybe I want that. Maybe I want this. I don't know. But what I've got now, I'm really happy with the setup. Jason and I do regular check-ins, whether they're kind of planned ones or ad hoc ones, to check that we're on the same kind of lines, to make sure that we're on the same page. But I don't feel that I've lost a sense of freedom or individuality. I get to go to so many cities for the business. I have my space, which I can always retreat to at any given moment. I have been on holiday with him. We actively decided to do that, planned it, got it in the diary, had people help us. If I wanted to go away on holiday alone, I'm sure I could, but I'd want him to be there. But there are some things that I'm like, don't bother coming with me. Oh God, it's the Scouting for Girls concerts. He would dread that. He would have a terrible time. Don't come with me. Don't come with me. And he wouldn't mind that comment. I'm saying it in a public forum. Poor thing. Poor thing. We do a lot together. We do plenty of things together. But I want to have things that I do on my own. And that includes having friends on my own. And don't get me wrong, like, be great if we can have a games night. We did that with a couple of friends of mine the other week. Come to park runs, come and watch me run, and be with my friends and get to know them. Like, that's fine, but there's no pressure to do it. And there are certain things that we would block off and say, that's not for you, that's not for me. Like, he wants to get back into freediving. I was like, I can come and support you if you want, but I'm not really fussed by it. In fact, I'll help you facilitate it. Like, because if there's the kids need looking after for you on a day, like I'll look after them for you if we can make the dates work, if whatever day and time it is, within reason. So you don't know until you start to do it. And then you realise it's not that scary, because if you set things up and you have conversations and you share expectations and find the middle ground of what that looks like, then everyone can be happy, because their needs are being met, their wants are being met, they're getting what they wanted from this relationship. If in those conversations it turns out that this isn't a good match, and it hurts if you care about and want to be with them, but practically it doesn't work because of what you want at that time. And that doesn't mean it can't work in 3 to 5 years' time. Once you've got that freedom bit out of you a bit more, maybe in a year, 2, 3 years' time, you are ready to go, you know what, I'm ready to give that little bit up now. I've kind of used it all up. I've got it all out of my system. So it's a conversation. It's a seeing where things are really at. And it's realising that to say yes to a relationship, you also say no to having default freedom all the time. But that doesn't mean that you have to follow the expectation that everyone gives of what a relationship looks like. You don't have to rush through any relationship escalator and milestones. You just do it at the pace that you want. Communicate as you go. And if someone's moving at much faster paces than the other, you've got to be the one to address that and say, look, this isn't going to work for us. As much as I love you, adore you, think you're great, and think we could be a good match, this bit means we're not. And it's having the bravery to have the conversation, the bravery to stick with what you need and want, and be aware of their side too, and go from there. It doesn't have to be giving up all of your freedom. There's definitely a balance to be struck. I think we're away from the idea that you have to run every decision by a partner. You probably should have your own money. Definitely in the early days, we're not combining money for years in. Like it's a different world to what it was before. Women have their own capability now. You're actually allowed to have, a credit card, bank account? I mean, that didn't come in for ages. So, yes, it is to some degree a sacrifice, but it's a sacrifice that eventually you want to do and you just get used to in the end. I hope sharing that's given you some ideas that it doesn't have to look a particular way. There's ways to pace it out. And if it turns out that you start and try and that it gets too much for you, you can either say, we need to slow down even more. Or if it's even that bad or they still want to push forward, then it's we've got to leave this here. Until next time, everybody, keep sparkling.